It became
Sal Paolantonio teaches us how football explains America.
You had a football game that now goes across the field, mirrors American society.
The unwavering faith of Sister Kathleen.
I really believe God has a plan.
And Randy Pausch's last lecture.
All right, let's talk about football. My dream was to play in the National Football League.
Football lessons from a professor, a nun, and an author. Today on NFL Films Presents.
NFL Films Presents is brought to you by The Home Depot, official home improvement sponsor of the NFL.
If you're an executive of a pro football team, this is just about the last guy you want to see.
What's up, guys?
It's been said that when ESPN reporter Sal Paolantonio shows up, there must be bad news. When there's controversy in the NFL, Sal's usually the one telling us about it.
Good morning, Sal.
Good morning, everybody. Coming up on SportsCenter, I'll have this story of why Eli Manning thinks he's really going to miss Plexico Burress. Okay.
How many interviews do you think that you've done over your career as a reporter and a writer?
Thousands and thousands and thousands of interviews.
Of all of those, who is the toughest coach to interview?
Bill Belichick, hands down. Bill Belichick is the toughest person I've ever interviewed. And I covered the famine in Africa for the Albany Times-Union. I was invited to the palace of Colonel Mengistu, the former dictator of Ethiopia. And he gave us more answers than Bill Belichick sometimes does. So should we expect more?
Sal was a political reporter before he was a sports reporter. So when ESPN landed an audience with Sarah Palin this fall, Sal's the guy they sent to do the interview.
United States of America.
Do you remember the nickname that you had?
It was Barracuda.
What was it?
It was Barracuda.
Now, why did you get that nickname?
Clearly, this is a man who knows how to ask a question.
You might listen to an interview at home and you'll go, ask the question, right? Get to the point. We're interested in their information and their emotions. No one cares what I know.
Actually, they do. How Football Explains America. Sal's new book, How Football Explains America, is a bestseller. For once, he's answering the big questions rather than asking them.
I've read a whole lot of history books about the NFL and about football in general. And I was always struck that none of those books ever answered the central questions of how and why the game was created and why it became our national obsession. We were a European colony, and like all the other European colonies, we were bequeathed the games of soccer and rugby from England and Wales. And yet, we got rid of those games. Why did that happen? When did it happen? How did it happen? Fascinated me.
His fascination wasn't ready for Amazon.com until the climax of Super Bowl 42, which he didn't even see.
I missed Tyree's catch. Couldn't see it because we were stuck behind the security guards waiting to go out and interview the very players who are now performing these very dramatic and heroic acts on the field.
Which you weren't seeing.
Which I was not seeing.
It was about the time Plexico Burress caught the game-winning touchdown that Sal realized what he was missing.
It dawns on me that I'm not seeing the story that I need to cover, and now I realize what the game means to the fan and what the story means to the game. I needed that fix. You know, what was the story? I missed the story, and that to me was the essence of the game.
The crux of Sal's theory is that rugby and soccer just weren't the kind of games Americans could grab hold of. We needed a game that told a different kind of story.
Walter Camp, Park Davis, Amos Alonzo Stagg, all the founding fathers of American football all write about the fact that soccer and rugby were unsatisfying to the American competitor and the American spectator because they were mass motion, and they tried to come up with ways to make the game more organized, controlled, and scientific.
Football was just a primitive mess until a couple of rules changes laid the groundwork for its transformation into America's game.
Now, here's an American idea, Steve, that Walter Camp had. One individual on the field slightly above the rest. It took a lot of time for the quarterback position to evolve into the natural hero protagonist. But they had the foresight to see that the quarterback position could grow up into this great mythological figure of sports.
But the rule that gave us John Elway was not the most significant one. After all, there's no helicopter play unless there's a first down to dive for.
The change of rule in 1882 to create the first down, I think, is the biggest rule change of any rule change in any sport. Now you could tell the story in the game that you would march down the field with the hero, and he would be arrayed against forces both man-made and by nature. There was a storyline that had a natural dramatic arc based on that particular change in the rule.
You talk about a painting by John Gass, 1872, called American Progress. Why is that painting so important in explaining why football is an expression of our culture and our society?
Well, if you look at that painting, it is a visual explanation of manifest destiny. The idea that America had the destiny that was given to it by God, that, you know, we would advance across the continent to our liking. And if you look at that painting, you have the imagery of angels and God. You have the imagery of learning. The angel is carrying a book, and that nothing will stop this march across the continent. So you had a football game that now goes across the field, mirrors American society.
It's the acquisition of territory.
Acquisition of territory. Capture territory, hold it, defend it. That's what we were doing in our country. And that's why the game, I think, subconsciously caught on to Americans.
Sal's book documents much of the game's evolution, from the impact of the '58 championship game, which Sal thinks is overrated, to the '60s of Lombardi and Namath. My favorite chapter is the one that starts at West Point.
I have a chapter in this book, Steve, called, and I wanted to call this book From MacArthur to Mangini. That was my original subtitle. There's a direct DNA linkage when you think about it, from General Douglas MacArthur to Eric Mangini.
Just reload.
MacArthur hired Blake to become his head coach. And, of course, Red Blake forged those great Army teams of the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s.
And Lombardi, of course, was an assistant coach at West Point under Red Blake.
Blake hired Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi coached Mickey Corcoran at St. Cecilia High School. Mickey Corcoran was Bill Parcells' basketball coach. Parcells goes back to West Point, learns all the tenets of the West Point coaching philosophy: field position, discipline.
Tell that undisciplined center we got to get his head out of his...
Parcells hires Belichick, who also has his dad, Steve, at the Naval Academy. And Belichick, of course, hires Eric Mangini, and Mangini goes off the reservation and gets hired by the New York Jets.
It was Belichick's Patriots who finally provided the inspiration for Sal to write the book he'd been thinking about for years. The entire 2007 season is woven through the book as a thread. Why?
It was really the perfect storm. The idea that you had the perfect team, the New England Patriots, that you had Tom Brady, the perfect hero, that you had Eli Manning, a young upstart, and of course, who is Bill Belichick? He's the evil Lord Sith in the hoodie.
2007 didn't give us the perfect team, but it did give us the perfect story. The kind of story America can't get enough of. And you were in the tunnel when it happened.
And I was in the tunnel and I didn't see any of it. And so I decided to, write about it in a way that sort of put it all together.
Keeping the Faith with Sister Kathleen, next on NFL Films Presents.
went to Super Bowl 42, few people thought they would ever get that far.
We ain't supposed to be here, right? This O-line we're facing today is the greatest O-line of all time. We don't stand a chance.
The question is fear versus faith. And I believe that this Giant team has faith. In their hearts, they think they can win this game.
The Giants won as a band of brothers, but they may have had some help from a sister. Kathleen Finnerty is a nun of the Ursuline religious order and has kept the faith for decades.
I like to put my whole life in the context of prayer, so that I try not to see anything as just happening by chance, that I really believe God has a plan. How is it going?
You might be wondering what Sister Kathleen had to do with the Giants' unexpected Super Bowl win. Well, it started when she lived and worked in New York.
Sister Kathleen was the principal of the School of the Resurrection in Rye, New York, where all of my kids have attended grammar school, and so I've known her for many, many years.
These are wonderful when you talk.
What John Mara didn't know was when Sister Kathleen moved to New Orleans in August of 2007, she found she had gone to football heaven.
You cannot be in New Orleans and not be a football fan. Friday night you have high school, Saturday the college. Sunday, the pros.
You're always in our prayers, whether you know it or not. There's Breeze. You see him? There's Breeze.
Breeze has lots of time, throws to Bush, runs away from a tackle. 10, 5, that's to the house, and another touchdown from Reggie Bush.
Now, this is not penance. This is pure party.
Nearly every weekend, Sister Kathleen and a group of nuns take part in their holy football trinity: high school, the Saints, and LSU.
Dear God, what is going on out there?
We may need the rosaries. We may need those rosaries.
I bring my knitting. I'm an avid knitter. I make Irish sweaters, fisherman knit, and the tenser I get, the faster I go, and people look at me and say, hey, you're making a lot of progress tonight.
Oh, come on, boys.
Football is a game of Hail Marys, and for Sister Kathleen, both are a way of life.
Our Lady of Prom Sucker is the patron of the city of New Orleans as well as the state of Louisiana. Prom Sucker sounds funny in English, but the French it means fast help.
The Ursuline sisters' devotion to Our Lady of Prompt Succor started in the 1800s when a French nun was granted permission to come to New Orleans after praying to a statue of Mary. She brought the statue with her, and since then, Our Lady of Prompt Succor has been credited with many miracles.
There was a huge fire that enveloped most of the French Quarter, and the sisters went to the chapel to pray. They took the small statue, and miraculously, the convent was saved. Several years later, General Jackson was heading up an army, and there was an invading British army. And once again, the sisters prayed, and the Andrew Jackson army was successful, but there were also miracles with small m's and miracles with capital M's.
And there are M's like the Manning brothers, natives of New Orleans. The Ursuline sisters have a soft spot in their hearts for Eli and Peyton.
Peyton, who's your favorite football player, then?
My dad.
Your dad's your favorite football player, too?
They may not know it, but they have gotten prayers over the years from the Ursuline community. When the Giants were going to be in the Super Bowl, another sister said, we can't let Eli down. We have to get the lady on it. The lady meaning Our Lady of Prom Succor. I said, well, I know John Mara. Why don't we send him a medal?
She sent me a letter prior to the Super Bowl enclosing a medal that she asked me to keep with me during the game. She said it was Our Lady of the Prompt Succor. It's for miracles, and saying, you might need a miracle, so why don't you hang on to this during the game? And of course I did.
I never promised that they'd win, but we felt a little prayer could help.
17-14, fellas. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
This is what every quarterback lives for, chance to win the game. Can Eli Manning do it?
There are more important things in the world to pray for than the outcome of a football game. But late in the fourth quarter, and you realize that your team has a chance to win the Super Bowl, all that goes out the window. So I found myself reaching in my pocket, just holding on to the medal.
3rd and 5 for the Giants. 1 1:16 to go.
A pulse-pounding finish to Super Bowl 42. Direct snap to Manning. Back to throw. The rush. Gonna be hit. Gonna be sacked. No, he got out of it. Now he fires downfield. And it is caught at the 24-yard line. How in the world did he do that?
You've got to be kidding. How did I feel? My heart was pounding. I thought everybody could hear it. I was just thrilled.
39 seconds to go. Manning takes the snap, looks left, lobs it left, throws it wide open, touchdown Giants! And the Giants, with the most improbable win, have won Super Bowl 42.
I didn't know Our Lady did football. So
I'm not sure whether that had anything to do with it or not, but I was glad that I had it with me.
The final score, the New York Giants 17, the New England Patriots 14.
I just want to do my part. You can never get too much help, right?
Why football was part of the last lecture. Next on NFL Films Presents. Teachers have shaped football history.
What we're trying to get is a seal here and a seal here.
What do you expect on the first snap, coverage-wise, you think?
And a history in football has shaped many teachers.
Every detail I could teach.
Perhaps no computer science professor ever learned more from football than Randy Pausch, who at Carnegie Mellon University gave his now famous last lecture.
In case there's anybody who wandered in and doesn't know the backstory, my dad always taught me when there's an elephant in the room, introduce them. If you look at my CAT scans, there are approximately 10 tumors in my liver, and the doctors told me 3 to 6 months of good health left. That was a month ago, so you can do the math. If I don't seem as depressed or morose as I should be, sorry to disappoint you. All right, so what is today's talk about then? It's about my childhood dreams and how I've achieved them. I've been very fortunate that way. And to some degree, lessons learned. I'm a professor. There should be some lessons learned. So what were my childhood dreams? At a certain point, you just realize there's some things you're not going to do, so maybe you just want to stand close to the people. And it's really cool to meet your boyhood idol. Childhood dream number 1? Check. This may seem mundane to you, but when you're a little kid, you see the big buff guys walking around in the amusement park and they got all these big stuffed animals. And I thought that was really cool. All right, next one. If you're curious about what zero gravity looks like,
We're having a great
there I am.
I don't think any of us.
That was just a great moment. But remember, I was born in 1960. It was an easy time to dream, right? When you're 8 or 9 years old and you look at the TV set and men are landing on the moon, anything is possible. And that's something we should not lose sight of. All right, let's talk about football. My dream was to play in the National Football League. I signed up when I was 9 years old. I was the smallest kid in the league by far. And I had a coach, Jim Graham, who was 6'4". He had played linebacker at Penn State. And he was old school. Okay, I mean really old school. Like he thought the forward pass was a trick play. And he showed up for practice the first day. It's this big hulking guy. We were all scared to death of him. And he hadn't brought any footballs. And one of the other kids said, "Excuse me, coach, but there's no football." And Coach Graham said, "Right. How many men are on a football field at a time?" I said, 11 on a team, 22. And Coach Graham said, "All right, and how many people are touching the football at any given time?" "One of them." And he said, "Right, so we're going to work on what those other 21 guys are doing." That's a really good story because it's all about fundamentals.
The little things.
Fundamentals, fundamentals, fundamentals.
The little things, the little things, the little things.
You've got to get the fundamentals down because otherwise the fancy stuff isn't going to work. There was one practice where he just rode me.
Wake up!
You're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, go back and do it again.
You're looking at me like I'm not even talking. You're not hearing me. Get your in gear.
And when it was all over, one of the other assistant coaches came over and said, "Yeah, Coach Graham rode you pretty hard, didn't he?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's a good thing." When you're screwing up and nobody's saying anything to you anymore, that means they gave up.
Casey, look at me.
That's a lesson that stuck with me my whole life. Your critics are your ones telling you they still love you and care.
It can never be about the last one. It's always got to be about the next one. You with me? You know what I'm saying?
After Coach Graham, I had another coach, Coach Setliff, and he taught me a lot about the power of enthusiasm.
Let's go tonight, Tampa. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Let it roll. Let it roll. Let it go. Let it out of your ass.
He did this one thing where only for one play at a time, he would put people in at like the most horrifically wrong position for them. Like all the short guys would become receivers. But we only went in for one play, and boy, the other team just never knew what hit them. When you're only doing it for one play and you're just not where you're supposed to be, boy, are you going to clean somebody's clock for that one play. And that kind of enthusiasm was absolutely lovely. And the other thing about football is we send our kids out to play football. We actually don't want our kids to learn football. I mean, yeah, it's really nice that I have a wonderful three-point stance and that I know how to do a chop block and all this kind of stuff. But we send our kids out to learn much more important things. Teamwork.
40 men together can't lose.
Sportsmanship, perseverance.
This is what you work all season for. This is why you lift all them weights. This is why you do all that.
Remember, some brick walls are made of flesh. But the brick walls give us a chance to show how badly we want something. And most of you don't know that I actually... No, I did not make it to the National Football League. But some things you're not going to do, so maybe you just want to stand close to the people. To this day, I am most comfortable on a football field. It's just one of those things where, you know, if I'm working a hard problem, people will see me wandering the halls with one of these things. And that's just because, you know, when you do something young enough and you train for it, it just becomes a part of you. And I'm very glad that football was a part of my life. And if I didn't get the dream of playing in the NFL, that's okay. I probably got stuff more valuable.
Next week, the greatest games of the 2008 regular season.
Rolls out, pumps once, now throws end zone. Will punt from his goal line. He's got it. Here they come. Cardinals blocked it. It's picked up. It's a touchdown. Cardinals win. The Eagles only have one timeout. And off Westbrook. Runs right. He is stopped. The New York Giants are going to go to 8-1.
Next week on NFL Films Presents.
NFL Films Presents is brought to you by The Home Depot, official home improvement sponsor of the NFL.